Good morning to one and all. Today's topic is related to stabilization of the soils. In the previous classes, we have discussed different things related to the stabilizations of soil. Especially, we discussed about tests to be conducted on the soils. That means before going to construct a project, we need to conduct some quantity of tests in the soil. In those tests also we are having two major classifications. Those are laboratory tests and in situ tests. In those laboratory tests we are majorly done triaxial test and vein shear test. And in situ test we are having different 4 to 5 tests were conducted. Entirely those 4 to 5 tests are having to done by using different quantities of equipment. Those are advanced equipments we have to use to conduct those in situ tests. But in case of laboratory tests, majorly we need to have vein shear test and triaxial compressive tests. Those two test values are required whenever we are going to construct a project. Why? Because if it is a road structure or any other structure which was in a that means which was in slopy areas, definitely we will go for those two tests to have a knowledge on what amount of load should be beared by the structure, if it is safe or unsafe for construction. To know those kind of values, we definitely we have to do those tests. But in case of today's topics, that means today's topic is entirely related to these stabilization of soils. In this particular stabilization of the soils, we have to discuss different things. That means related to this stabilization. Normally stabilization have to be done for weak soils. Weak soils means if there is no proper bond between particles and there is no proper strata, that means layer by layer phenomena is there in the soils. For those kind of soils, definitely we have to use these stabilization techniques. These are the things we have to discuss. Before going to discuss those things, we have to know what is a soil. That means a soil is a huge material which will having different physical properties and chemical properties depending upon the elements present in the strata. Normally soil means in our localities we have observed a black cotton soil or red soil, but in case of desert areas we have to find only sand. But in case of glaciers we need to observe a huge amount of frozen ice. But in case of hilly areas we have to observe only hard rock beds. So that the soil is entirely different. That means it is a eroded part of a hilly area or magma which was come out from the lava after densification of lava, simply due to this natural climate is like wind, water and other natural resources. Those are having some influence to convert those hard rock bed into a small grain particles. After the conversion of those hard bedrock to small grain particles, those small grain particles normally we are called as a soils. In the soil also we are having different classifications. Some of the soils are not used for cultivations. Why? Because those are having some quantity of salts. Those salts directly influence the vegetative matter, the grow of vegetative matter, so that those some of the soils are not suitable for the vegetative, that means cultivation. Some of the soils are having suitable for cultivation and some of the soils having suitable for this ponds, and like that means definitely you have to go for fishings. Likely different soils having different properties. In our civil engineering purpose also we are having different soils, so that we have to observe what are the properties lies in our soil, whether it is suitable for construction or not. If it is not suitable for construction, what way we have to use those material for our construction work, all those things we need to study. Then only we have to construct a large structures with a less quantity of amounts, so that a soil having a major importance in our civil engineering purpose. If it is a dam, so that the soil have to bear huge amount of hydrostatic pressures. Why? Because the total water will have to withstand by using a dam matter, that means concrete matter, and surrounding soil properties. If you are constructing a huge amount of tall building, definitely the wind and soil properties also having enough influence, so that for every structure there may be some quantity of importance related to these soil properties. Next one is what is soil stabilization? That means for some quantities of soils we are having less physical, that means less chemical properties. Normally chemical properties what we have to observe means bonding. A small chemical daily we are consuming what it was water. In water also we are having two components, those are hydrogen and oxygen. In between hydrogen and oxygen we are having some chemical bonds, that is H2O ionic bond is there, so that those two particles are simply combined together and form as a water. Normally when we are heating those H2O, simply they are converting into hydrogen and OH minus ions, so that there may be no bond between the two atoms. When we are cooling those two atoms, simply they will form as ice, that means a solid matter, so that there may be definitely a chemical change is there while we are heating, while we are freezing, so that the densification and the quantity of matter will varies. That means in what manner means normally water is in liquid state, we are increasing the temperature, those liquid will be converting into a vapor state, while we are decreasing the temperature, automatically those liquid will be converting into a frozen state. Likely in our soil also we need to add some quantities of additives, so that there may be getting of huge amount of strength whenever we are adding some quantities of chemicals. Here stabilizations means normally we need to add some quantities of stabilizers to increase the strength of the soil, so that adding of artificial chemicals or naturally occurring chemicals to the soil and increasing the properties, those we will call it as a soil stabilization. Normally stabilization is a physical property required to the soil. If the stabilization is very less, definitely we have to go for these artificial stabilizations like physical or chemical or strengthening properties. This is the things we need to know about soil stabilization. Before going to soil stabilization, we are having many classifications. We have to know all those classifications. First of all, before going to the stabilizations, we need to know about what is soil, how the soil form, what are the elements in the soil, and the classifications. First of all, soil is defined as a mixture of organic matter. That means mixture means combination of organic matter. Organic means normally in our chemistry we are studied. Organic means only content of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. Those three combination of elements we will call as a organic matter, comma minerals. Normally minerals means we are having a plenty of minerals like iron, aluminium, copper, zinc, likely like metallic minerals and inorganic minerals we are having. Next one is the gases like oxygen, methane, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides. All those are related to gases. Next one is the liquids. Liquid means we are normally consider this water. After that water now we are using petrol. All those are comes under these liquids. And infinity organisms. Organisms means normally we are having a different organisms. From the starting stage of earth to till now we are having crores of organisms was every day burning and simply dying in the earth, so that those matter will be simply converting into the like organic matter and dissolved into our earth surfaces, so that soil is combination of organic matter, minerals, gases, liquids and other infinity of organisms. Those are simply combining into our earth masses. After that, the soil is generally gone under a development or changes of physical, chemical, and biological processes. Here, three process majorly we have to observe. First one is the physical process. That means physical means a solid substance is there. Those substance will have to go a different for deformations. That means deformation means normally we have to observe a particularly tree we have to take. In this particular tree, the tree have very much huge amount of greenery in rainy season, but in case of winter season the total leaves will be falling. But in case of summer season the total tree is in like a dead position we have to observe. So that there are different changes in the tree. Likely we are having a rock we need to take, so that the rock have to disintegrate day by day, day by day, day by day, due to these physical parameters like hot. That means sun is directly giving huge amount of temperature to the earth, so that due to those temperature there may be some quantities of bond breaking in the surface of the earth. After that we are having flow of water. Due to this flow of water also we are having erosion and denudation. And next one is the air. That means completely the air is also having some quantity of effects on the disintegration of the materials from large molecule to small molecules, so that all those are having influence on this physical properties of our earth. Likely we are having in olden days we are having plenty amount of natural resources, but day by day simply man consuming all of those and disintegrating those natural beauties, so that we are missing our physical beauty parameters of our earth. Next one is the chemical. That means chemical means in our earth crusts we are having different quantities of chemicals. That means not in our pure chemical states, they are in normal state. Simply after purification and removing the effluents from the normal matter we are getting these chemicals. Those are also natural chemicals are there, and artificial laboratory made chemicals are there. Natural chemicals are comes under this ayurveda, and artificial chemicals we have to obtain from our labs like tablets and different daily usage utilities like shampoos and floor cleaners and other different effluents for our man-made purposes and man uses. Next one is the biological processes. That means biological process means due to this decay and born things. That means normally in our earth, that means in the earth itself we are having a plenty number of organisms like moving organisms, and staying at particular point we are having different organisms. So that like trees we are having a one quantity of organisms, those are simply stacking at a place. Those are also degrading and decomposition takes place. But in case of humans they are simply moving organisms like humans and other vegetative animals and these meat eating animals. All those are comes under this biological process. Simply they are converting those matter into a organic matter, which include the weathering of association and erosion. All those are comes under these properties. That means converting a huge amount of substance to small substance. The majority of the soil stabilization methods are employed for soft soil in order to achieve desirable engineering properties. That means majority of soil stabilizations, normally in our soil stabilizations what we have to take means we need to improve the property of soil. That means in weaker state to stronger state we have to obtain those matters, so that we need to improve those properties by using simply different chemical and physical parameters like simply we have to use rollers. After that we have to use different chemical components for stabilization of the soils. Those things we will call as a soil stabilizations. Next, as per the research, that means in our daily day-to-day work we have to require some quantities of research work. Why? Because simply in our olden days we are consuming a huge amount of materials for our production purpose. That means production of any matter. But nowadays we are using less quantity of materials and producing more amount of production, so that we need to get those quantities of huge amount of bulk properties simply by research work. So that as per research of Sherwood, small sized or grain molecules can be easily stabilized due to their large surface area in relation with their particle diameter. That means as per research of Sherwood. Here Sherwood is a scientist who discovered the properties of particles whenever they are in a smaller size and larger size. That means if the particles are very larger, means automatically there may be less contact between particle to particle. That means if you have to take, I will show with the diagram. If you take a larger particles, so that the bond is like that, means a smaller bond is there between the particle to particle. If you take a small particle, so that there may be huge amount of bond between them. Likely we have to observe what is the bond between large size particles and what is the bond between small size particle whenever they are in larger dia and smaller dia. This is the comparison have been done by Sherwood. So that for a larger particle there may be huge amount of stabilizations are required, but in case of smaller size particles we need to require a small amount of stabilization methods. So that clay soil surface area is compared to others have larger surface area due to those flat and elongated particle shapes. Normally we have to observe a sand is a fine grain particles, and we have to observe this gravel, that means these stones for the construction of our daily. Normally we are using stones for our construction purpose as a coarse aggregate. We have to observe those stones and fine aggregate. Normally stones having huge amount of diameter and length, but in case of sand we are having less quantities of shapes and diameter. So that sand particles having huge amount of bond between them. In case of stones they are having less quantity of bond between them due to their shapes and sizes. On the other hand, silty soil material also sensitive to small changes in moisture, and therefore they may prove difficult during stabilization. So that every particle and different quantities of substances have different natures when they are having stabilizations. That means whenever we have to do stabilization for a sandy area, that means we have to go for one quantity of stabilization method. Whether we have to go for this gravel stabilize, that means gravel land we need to stabilize. In those conditions we have to require another quantity of stabilization. Why? Because the gravel size is very large compared to a sand size particle. Whenever we are going to stabilize a clay matter, that means clay matter is very fine in nature compared to this sand. So that we have to go for another alternative stabilization method. So that according to particle size we have to decide different stabilizations. Next one, what is soil stabilizations? In the before slide we have observed what are the different stabilization, that means particle to particle we have to use. But in case of the soil stabilizations, what we have to do is soil stabilization is a method of improving soil properties. That means in the previous before stabilization the soils having some quantities of weak properties. After stabilizations we are getting certain quantities of properties which are greater than a normal level. So that the stabilizations having some advantages compared to normal soils. Soil properties are adding and mixing other materials to it. That means some quantities of additives. Additives means some other particles from other lands or other industrial areas we have to borrow, and those materials we need to mix with existing sand, existing our rocks or any other matter. So that normally in nowadays we are using fly ash for stabilization purpose. Why? Because fly ash is daily we are using coal, and coal for the production of this current. Why? Because in our thermal power plants we are using coal, and we are getting the current. After the burning of coal, simply we are getting a huge amount of fly ash. Simply we are throwing those fly ash on the inert areas automatically due to this wind and water and other natural parameters. All those fly ash will damage our natural resources like wind and water. That means normally whenever there is a rainy season, automatically due to this falling of rain, those fly ash will be carried by water, and that fly ash will damage our groundwater and other natural resources like rivers, ponds, and other streams. So that we have to do an alternative method for using that fly ash. Simply, whenever in our India we are having most quantities of road, that means large number of roads are there. So that whenever there is a repair, automatically we need to use those fly ash for our repair purpose of the roads. Definitely we have to overcome those bad qualities obtaining from the fly ash. So that we have to use those kind of materials which are coming from the industries. Definitely will obtain a good amount of strength as well as recycling criteria. So that stabilization is very much important nowadays to enhance the shear strength parameters of the soil and increase the bearing capacity of the soil. That means what is enhancing means simply enhancing is a increment parameter. Normally increment parameter means soils having some less properties like particle liquid limits and plastic limits, shrinkage limits, and shear strength, compressive strength, and axial strength. Those properties we have to obtain by simply getting these quantities of fly ash and certain amounts of fly ash to the land. We have to mix those quantities very well. After that we have to roll with these rollers like sheep foot roller, pneumatic wheel trail rollers, and flat surface roller, and vibro compacting rollers. All those rollers we have to use and we have to compact. Then we will get a good quantity of soil with physical parameters and strength parameters. This is the soil stabilizations. By conducting those kind of stabilizations, definitely we will improve the bearing capacity. In what way we have to use this bearing capacity means if we want to construct a huge amount of structure, definitely the soil having good quantity of bearing properties, then only we have to proceed our construction. Without bearing capacity we won't go for construction. Why? Because after construction of a particular project for 2 to 3 years, due to this water problems and surrounding soil problems, definitely the structure will sink. Definitely for every year by year there may be some quantities of sinking of structure into the soil due to weak bearing capacity. It is generally required when the soil under foundation for a construction is not suitable to carry structural load. That means if the soil is having very weaker parameters like this bearing capacity and compressive strength parameters, then we have to what we have to go means it will not be able to carry the structural load. In that particular case, what we have to do this, definitely we have to go for this soil stabilization parameters. Normally in soil stabilization method, it is a remedial measure. That means it is a remedy. Normally remedy means in different cases we are getting different problems due to this uh, environment. Likely in our summer season we are having a problem with huge amount of heat, but in case of our winter season we are having a problem with smog. In case of rainy season we are having a problem with water. So that in those particular seasons we have to use other alternatives. That means in our summer season normally we are using air conditioners, but in case of winter seasons we are using these boilers for heating of water and other drinking purposes. Likely in rainy seasons definitely we are using different raincoats for our protection purpose. Likely here also in the case of soil, that means strength properties, we have to go for different parameters and incremental parameters for improving the soil bearing capacity. Here also what we are doing is stabilization. That means stabilization means simply we are using artificial parameters, that means artificial substances, to improve the soil strength. By using artificial parameters, what we have to get is simply a remedial method that reduces the soil permeability. remedial measure simply reduces, means it decreases the soil permeability. What we have to get when we decrease the soil permeability means definitely there may be no penetration of water onto the subsurfaces. In case of no penetration of water into subsurface, automatically the total soil is in dry condition. That means there is no entrainment of water into the soils. Then the soil having a huge amount of lifespan. There may be no cracks forming in the structure due to no entrainment of water into the subsurface. But in this case we are having a major problem. What it was is simply, if there is no penetration of water into subsurface, automatically we have to go for, that means we have to observe the draft conditions in groundwater level. That means if the groundwater is not recharged, automatically after few years there may be no water in our ground. Definitely we have to understand. That means definitely we have to go for these rivers and other alternative methods for water. That means drinking purpose of drinking water and other industrial uses, so that we have to use only some quantities of areas. That means some quantities of areas normally we are using for our living purpose. In those areas only we need to use these methods. If you use these methods in all over the earth, definitely we have to go for draft like conditions in the earth surfaces. Like its shear strength and other properties will helps the reducing the settlement of the structures. If there is no entrainment of water, automatically the shear strength will be decreases and the strength parameters will be increases. That is the main theme. In what way the earth should be get the strength means, automatically if there is no entrainment of water in a particular area, automatically that area will be strengthened, and that area we are having less quantity of these shear forces. And what are the major things we need to improve? That means if we are constructing a particular quantities of buildings, that means normally in our TVs, that means televisions, we are observing different quantities of ads. That means we are observing ad. That means what those are means some projects, villas and double bedroom flats, and a huge amount of constructions are there, so that you have to book your plot. Simply they are saying on those particular areas they are constructing huge number of apartments one by one in a plenty number of ways, so that in those particular cases, definitely in those areas after a few 5 to 10 years there may be no water in the ground level, so that they have to go for other alternative measurements. Whenever they are having a earth free, that means construction free areas, in those areas they will have to construct these boreholes. That means boreholes and pit holes for improvement of water. Normally the stabilization also having huge amount of advantages and disadvantages. These are the advantages. What is the major disadvantages? And non penetration of water, that means unsinking of water. The soil stabilization methods have to improve these major four properties, and those first one is compressibility. That means compressibility means the structure will have its own weight. Due to its own weight also it have to penetrate into the ground, so that we need to control that penetration by using different quantities of foundations and different types of designs. Next one is the strength parameters. That means strength means normally earth having some amount of strength, so that we need to improve those strength against our structural loads. Next one is the permeability. Permeability means normally allowing of entrainment of water into our that means structural profile of the ground, so that if the permeability is very high, automatically the structure parameters will be decreases. That means physical parameters and chemical parameters. Normally physical parameters means on the above two we are having compressibility and strength. Those are physical parameters to the earth structure. What is the chemical parameter? Means whenever we are entering the water into our ground surface, the water having huge amount of effluents coming from different industries and household purposes. Whenever those effluents are simply absorbing the soil, automatically the soil will be weakened. So that due to those weakened properties of soils also, there may be sinking of earth will be takes place. That means a structure will takes place. Next one is the durability. The durability aspects we have to consider. Why? Because in our atmosphere, the day by day, simply the total natural resources like water, air are simply polluting by means of our industrialization and globalizations. So that we need to reduce those two quantities up to a sufficient manner. We have to go for industrialization and globalization. Beyond those limits, definitely we have to face an ultimate things. That means a huge amount of destructive things with the help of these environmental parameters like wind, erosion and water and other cyclonic parameters. In every year, America and other foreign countries are facing huge amount of tornadoes. Why? Because those are consuming huge amount of energy from different sources of earth, so that earth is giving back energy to them. And introduction about these different techniques, why we have to use for the, that means in what way we have to go for strengthening properties. First one is the scarcity of a suitable construction site. Why we have to go for strengthening means scarcity. Scarcity means normally low quantities of that means low quantity of land is there. That means low quantity means normally lands having different parameters, strength parameters and structural parameters. So that few lands are suitable for construction purpose, remaining all lands are not suitable for construction purpose. So that land is very low compared to our, that means in our earth totally 75 to 80% of the earth is covered with water. Only 20% we are used for different areas. That means on the 20% also we are having these forests, hilly areas and rivers, plateaus and other things. In those also only we have a 2 to 5% of land for our construction purpose. So that we have to use those 2 to 5% of land for our construction purpose. In those also we are having different varieties, strengthened soil and poor soils. So that we have to improve the poor soil strength by using these stabilization techniques. First of all, what are the different problems in the soils? First major thing we are having is collapsible soil. What is collapsible soil? Normally collapse means whenever we are having a application of load on the structure, due to huge amount of application of the load onto the structure, definitely at a particular point the total structure will collapse. Likely here the soil also, whenever we are applying a particular quantity of load on the soil, it will bear up to its ultimate point. Beyond the ultimate point, whenever we are applying the load means automatically the total structure will sink down, or definitely in any manner, that means in any direction, whether it may be x direction or y direction or z direction, the soil will have to flow, so that it is in condition of collapsible condition. Next one is the liquefiable soils. In the liquefiable soil means automatically some quantities of soils are majorly storing huge amount of water. Why? Because of this permeability and seepage and penetration properties. Those soils will definitely absorb huge amount of water in rainy seasons, so that some quantities of constructions are not suitable in those lands. So that we have to use those lands simply by modifying those parameters of penetrations and permeability loss. Simply we have to use different quantities of additives, water repellents and non-absorbing materials like stones and other things we have to use. Next major thing is waste materials. That means waste materials means automatically in our day-to-day purpose, we are using huge amount of materials for our food purpose and living purpose. So that from those two things we are getting huge quantity of waste materials. So that we have to use those waste materials in a proper way. Otherwise, those waste materials will cause huge amount of problem to our day-to-day lives. Right? Because if we are using biodegradable matter, that means our food waste, if we are not properly treating our food waste, automatically those waste will be exhaust some quantities of gases like methane and other sulfur dioxide gases. Simply whenever we have to consume those gases, automatically we have to go for different mind problem. That means our brain is not properly working. Due to the improper working of brain, automatically our total body will be in different conditions. That means some of the parts of our body will not be work due to this improper treatment of waste materials. So that in our earth also we are having huge amount of waste materials like fly ash, GGBS, metallic stone dusts, and all those are waste materials. So that those waste materials we have to use in a proper way for improving the soil properties. Next one is the expansive and shrinkage. Normally, what is expansion means whenever there is a some quantities of matter is adding to the structure, automatically due to those addition of some matter, the total structural volume may be expanding. Likely black cotton soil we have to observe whenever we are adding water, definitely those soil will be having huge amount of volumetric change in the form of increment. Next one is the shrinkage. That means the shrinkage we have to observe in red soils. If there is a huge amount of temperature and other climatic parameters like smog and others, definitely due to those two actions, the total volume of the structure will be reduces. Those things we have to call it as a shrinkage. Due to those two conditions also, whenever we are constructing a structure on those lands, automatically in rainy seasons the structure has to be somewhat height from the normal ground level. But in case of summer season, the structure will have to go down due to this less quantity of water present in the soil. Next one is the marshy and soft soils. Normally marshy and soft soils means this have to observe in vegetative areas. Whenever there is a vegetative area, normally vegetative area means these forests and other trees enriched areas. That means some of the parts of our cities having huge amount of trees for the purpose of air purification techniques. Nowadays we are using different quantities of programs to enrich the trees in villages and other urban areas, so that in those particular areas due to huge amount of oxygen and other water problems we have to face these marshy lands. And soft soils we have to form whenever there is a huge amount of flow of water and flow of wind in those areas. We will get these soft soils. Why? Because if the water is continuously flowing from one part to another part, automatically the water will carry a matter along with the flow. Automatically due to the flow of those water we have to get these soft soils. In case of soft soils we won't have to go for construction. Why? Because the strength properties are very weak in soft soils. Next one is the crash deposits. That means normally crash deposits means along the coastal areas we are having these crash deposits due to this flow of tides and other marine deposits. All those are comes under these crash deposits. Next one is the wide economy, wide applications. In industries we are using different quantities of chemicals and we are using enriched applications. Due to those enriched applications and wide quantities of applications, automatically the total structures are, that means the total structural parts of our earth are weakened. In those areas we have to go for these stabilization parameters. And next one is the economy. Economy plays a major role in our day-to-day life. If the structure want to be strong, automatically we have to go for
huge amount of economy. If the structure is also having less quantity of economy, means automatically those also leads to a poor structure with less quantities of compressive properties, tensile properties. So that we have to observe these things. This is what we have to observe. These two in this particular diagram, we are having a liquefaction. That means in the starting diagram, we are having some quantities of structure. Do on the structure we are having parts. That means arrows are shown downwards. Why? Because due to these gravitational forces, the structural load will act downwards onto the soil profile. Below the soil structure we are having a particular land. That means orange color bubbles are there. Those bubbles are simply particles and their bondings to surrounding molecules in the earth structure. Next one we are having in the first figure we are having less quantity of water. In the second figure we are having a huge amount of water. In those cases particularly the total particles of our earth will flowing. Why? Because there is a huge amount of water due to this improper. That means normally water is a polar molecule, that means polar solvent, and earth is a another kind of solvent. So that two different solvents are merged in the location, so that there may be no proper mixing. Automatically our structure have to sink in one direction or any direction due to this application of forces. After that we are having some techniques. That means liquefaction technique. The total water we have to draw down, so that in those cases also we have to go for these liquefaction techniques, and the total structure will having on one direction. So that we need to take care before going to construction. So that we have to observe what is the present water content in our soil. Is it safe or not for our structure? So that if it is not safe, we have to go for other dewatering techniques or any other parameters we need to choose. This is the example. That is, this is the figures giving an example. What is the effect of content? That means presence of water in the soil below the foundation level. This is the major role the water plays in our structural lifespan. It is also the figure simply giving on the one part. That means above below here we have to observe it is a tree. In this particular part, due to we are simply spraying a particular quantity of water in the lawn areas. In those particular lawn areas, the water will be absorbed by the soil present in the lawn, and due to the absorbance of water, some quantity of increment to the top layer is there. Due to those increment of top layer, the layer of concrete also having an upward movement. Normally this movement we will call it as a volumetric change of soil. This volumetric change we will call it as a shrinkage. And in further topics we have to discuss the